Hi, welcome back to another episode of Analyze Scripts. I'm here as always with my co-host, Dr. Katrina Fury, a psychiatrist, and I am Portia Pendleton, a licensed clinical social worker practicing as a therapist.
Yes.
We're really excited to dive into today's episode. We both watched, me for the first time, you for the
Bazillionth time.
At the movie Inside Out.
Yeah, Disney Pixar movie. Yeah, I was I've seen this movie a bazillion times, but I love it every single time. And I remember I first saw it when it came out a couple of years back. I was just going into my second year of psych residency at Yale, and me and a couple of my co-residents went to the movie theater together and watched this all together. And it was so great.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was such a great depiction of emotions and development. And we'll totally get into all of it, but I just really love this movie.
Do you remember talking about it or what you guys thought right after? Did anything stick with you? Anything that anybody said or liked?
I think so much of it. I think we loved the depiction of the different types of memory.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're on the train, trying to get back to Riley's, what do they call it? The control center or something. Just going through the different lands of the brain. Mm-hmm. And it was so well done.
Yeah.
One thing I remember we all talked about was I wonder how they came up with the 5 main emotions. Because they were anger, disgust, fear, sadness, and joy. And I always thought disgust, that was the one where I was I wonder how they came up with that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we sort of spent some time talking about that.
Yeah. So just a little premise, if you haven't seen it, I do recommend. It's short, it's silly. I feel you can pause it and put it back on. But it's about a child
I think she's 12-ish.
Yeah, the most of the story takes place when she's, in that age range. But you first kind of see her as a baby, and the movie kind of goes through her experience with really, really, I'd say innate basic emotions to developing more complex
emotions, right? All in the context of a big move, a major life transition. When Riley and her family moved from Minnesota to San Francisco, and it was just so well done, and just so amazing. I thought even picking her age was spot on. I feel we go from seeing her have these 5 primitive, very separate emotions to being able to start integrating different feelings and hold on to them at the same time. And that's exactly around the time I think psychologically that would be able to happen. And just throwing in the move and how that sort of disrupts her feelings and showing the tension between her own inner feelings and what she thinks her parents want her to feel, and then rebelling a little bit at the end. It was just so great. Yeah, I really loved it. It was such a unique concept and interesting premise and way to depict psychological development in childhood as you move into adolescence.
And what really does, I think it just gives kids and adults a really good picture of what happens in your brain.
I know.
I like to think of it, and I feel it would be nice to even explain maybe to some people, maybe I guess a little bit younger, but I think adults too, that this is what happens. Yes, it's more technical and it's not as pretty. Our brains are gray. But, the control center with the emotions kind of working together or, sometimes in conflict.
Right.
And then how our memories are stored and them directing each way. It's that is what happens.
Right. And I think it does give language and imagery to little kids about this stuff. And, I've heard children say, depict their anger, they're turning red, and just like that guy. And, I just think it's so great. I just loved it.
So Inside Out also has a pretty all-star cast. And I think some of the voices I recognized but couldn't place, and now that we kind of took a deep dive into that, I'm oh my gosh, I love them. So we have Amy Poehler, who plays kind of the main lead, which is Joy,
which is perfect. What a perfect casting decision.
Her voice, her cadence, her tone, I feel it's very joyful.
She was great.
And then we have Mindy Kaling, who did the Disgust characters. Her I didn't place at all.
Really?
I think now, if I listened back, I probably would, but
And she did a great job too, right? Like it was perfect.
Yep.
And then we have Bill Hader as Fear. That one I didn't place till I like looked it up. And I was like, that's so great. Like they're just so perfect. And Lewis Black is Anger, who was like one of my favorites. Again, I really love the depiction of anger.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious about how different creative people like put anger into imagery and words and everything. Whoops.
You liked Angry Man and Shrinking too.
I did.
So
I just
that's interesting.
That. Yeah, I like that. And then who else did we have for sadness? We had the woman from The Office that you were really excited about.
Okay, if you have seen The Office, you know how her voice is. And so please, if you have not seen Inside Out, like just picture her character and her tone and how she talks. Just as this little short blue blob of sadness.
I know.
Like, walking around and, I didn't mean to do that. It's like she's perfect for the role.
And also like the way they drew these 5 main emotions was also perfect, right? We have Joy, who's like taller and wearing this bright blue dress. And I think she's got like blue hair and she's like bopping around, all zooming everywhere. We have Sadness, the little blue Eeyore blob with glasses and a turtleneck. And then we have Disgust, who's green and kind of like sassy and wearing jewelry and her hair's a little flippy. And then Anger is like a big red square. Yeah. And then Fear is just this like little string bean of like something that could just like melt into the floor, right? And I was just like, it's so great.
Yes.
I loved it. And then the human characters were also really interesting and pivotal. So we have Diane Lane, who voiced Riley's mom. We had Kyle MacLachlan, who voiced Riley's dad. And then Riley herself was played by an actress named Caitlin Diaz. And they've all been in a lot of, different movies and TV shows themselves. So it really was an all-star cast.
Yeah.
And how could I forget Bing Bong? What did you think about Bing Bong?
So Bing Bong was the imaginary friend, right? So I thought his character was so sweet. The only time I got a little teary-eyed was in the movie where I think Bing Bong kind of realizes that like he is like he's supposed to kind of fade into your childhood experience and not kind of follow you to adolescence. So he like helps Joy get back to the main switchboard so she can help
help Riley.
Yeah, help Riley out.
Yeah, I know. So beautiful. So Bing Bong was played by Richard Kind, who is an actor that I wouldn't know that name off the top of my head, but I know him. Like when I look at him and he voices like all these different funny characters like on Curb Your Enthusiasm, Mad About You. He's just a funny comedian. So where do we start?
So I liked the first scene a lot because I feel like it's really kind of accurate with what babies see. So it's like the first emotion that kind of like shows up is joy, right? And it's like you're kind of awe at the world. You don't see very well, but like you can see your parents' faces, right? They're really close to you and they're really happy. They're smiling. And then I think that was just like a really beautiful moment. And then
very quickly.
I think sadness, right, comes in.
Or I thought it was anger, like when she starts crying.
Yes.
Maybe it was sad. I don't know which one of the.
And it was just like a lot.
Yeah, it was so
that one like took over, right? Like, really change my diaper. I'm hungry. Like, this is how I get my need met. I don't know how to speak yet.
Yes, it was so funny. And how they show them taking over so quickly, like at the switchboard. I just loved. And I love the parents' reactions too.
Yeah. So I just really liked that scene in general. I thought it was really accurate again, and kind of a good introduction to like all the characters and how the emotions kind of show up at different stages of early development.
Right. Early, super early development.
So
totally.
Fear, right? Like fear is really appropriate because it does keep us safe. It helps, kids. I think she was like hopping over a cord, which again is like safe, but like,
but to a child like, that age is really scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so Fear was like warning her, and then Disgust came in and was like, I think it was funny about the broccoli.
Yes, the broccoli pizza.
Like, what is this? It's green. Like, I can't take this. She has a temper tantrum then.
Yes,
like,
and also like and then how that carries over to when they're in San Francisco and like they thought like, let's go get some pizza. Yep. This will be safe. This will, Riley brings that up. She can tell her parents are stressed because the moving van doesn't show up and there's fighting. And she's like, let's go get some pizza. Then they show up and it's like San Francisco, probably like vegan broccoli pizza. And I remember Anger was like, they can't even get pizza right here.
Yeah. It was so sweet. So I think just knowing about, right, like child brain development, I think we could go off on a really long tangent here that I will, try to shorten. But I really wanted to kind of just talk about like child brain elasticity and why children can be so resilient. Their brain is still forming. They're still making all these connections in their, synapses.
Yeah, ooh, nice.
They're all firing.
I love science words.
So I think that was really cool. And then when we see later on in the movie, we see like the long-term memory shapes, and it looks like
it looks like a brain, the sulci and the gyri of the brain. Exactly. I know. And then when they had all the memories there as these like beautiful little globes that all like had at the beginning like one color. It was like one main color. It was like, yellow for joy, blue for sadness, green for disgust, red for anger, and then purple for fear, I think. And then as we progress into adolescence, they start being multiple colors. And that's at first when joy was like, sadness, don't touch this. You're going to ruin the core memory. And sadness is like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And that tension between joy and sadness the whole time, like chef's kiss, moi. Like, wow. And then the fact that at the end, like sadness was the hero of the day, being able to like sit with your authentic feelings in this big move and missing your friends and approaching adolescence. It was so beautiful.
There was a powerful moment with sadness comforting. Was it Bing Bong?
I think so.
And like Bing Bong was really upset crying, and then sadness like sat down and offered, her ear, and it was just like, yeah, like that's really sad.
I know.
And joy, up until this point was like really trying to avoid, right? Like any uncomfortable emotions, specifically sadness, feeling it like as unhelpful.
Like it's going to hurt Riley.
Right. And so joy at that moment was like, whoa, like how did you do that? Because Bing Bong is like be able to regulate himself after sadness helps him. And sadness was just like, yeah, like that's, I just sat with him and I was sad.
And again, that's what we all need to learn, right? Is that it's okay to feel sad or any of these other authentic feelings and a big mix of all the emotions, and to sit with it and validate. Even when she like got on Bing Bong's level, it's like such a good depiction.
Yeah.
And again, joy, I feel like if Riley developed with joy still steering the ship the whole time, you could totally see her turn into like a toxic positivity type of person, like can't acknowledge any sadness, like has to turn away from it all the time.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful. I really loved it. And I loved the depiction of the different types of memory.
Yeah.
We have like long-term memory, short-term memory, facts. I loved the bubblegum jingle, how it just like pops into your head, even if you don't want it. And then
do you have a jingle?
In my head?
Yeah. Like, do you have like a commercial or like a song? Because I totally have like 5.
Yeah. What are yours?
So the J.G. Wentworth commercial. Call J.G. Wentworth 877 cash now
or something.
877 cash now. Don't you ever forget that.
Yeah.
And then the one from a long time ago that was like education connection, connected for free.
Yeah. Education connect. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, about like connecting you to colleges and stuff.
It's a long song that I'm sure I knew the entire thing at one point, but like I'm such a like music hook person where I think that's too why they make us, which this made me think of it when they were in long-term memory and the like cleanup crew comes in and they're throwing away some of the presidents.
They keep that. Oh, yeah.
And let's keep Lincoln, let's keep George Washington. I was like, that's so relatable. But I learned a song when I was little to remember the presidents. Oh. So I remember probably like the first 10. It's like Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Adams, Jackson, Van Buren, and then I don't remember.
Right.
But songs are helpful
with memory for sure. That's so funny. No, I loved that depiction of like how certain songs and things like that get stuck in your memory, and how like they were thinking about getting rid of that, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And it like would come up at other points.
Yes.
It was so funny.
The little like cleanup crew like thinks it's funny. They're like, well, we'll send up this jingle to main, central office. Yeah. And they
like
do at some point.
Yeah,
and they all of a sudden, get that memory like, up to it. Yeah. It was just,
and
again,
then I think
so
at
relatable.
Other points you see like the parents also hearing it in their own version of the emotions. I love the parents having their own versions. Like when they were at the table, like in their first night in their apartment, or not the first night, but like, trying to talk to Riley, and she's like really cranky after that day at school, and how the like hockey tryouts didn't go well. And mom is trying to like signal at dad, like, I need some help here. She's real cranky. And you see the mom's emotions being like, oh, send the signal to dad. Oh, he's not getting it. Yeah. Why did we give up that, I don't know, Brazilian musician?
And then they show him. They like project this like, past love interest to mom's vision in front of dad, so she like can tolerate dad, it feels like. Yeah. And I thought it was funny, or I noticed that all the emotions in mom and dad's brain all had like the same hairstyle.
Yes. like the adult versions. Yes. Yeah. And then when dad finally like gets the hint, and he's like, so Riley, how was your day? And all the mom feelings are like, oh God, no.
We just asked that. She already responded poorly.
I thought that's so funny. I just loved it. And then when like dad's anger and Riley's anger are both like coming together.
Yes.
It's just so, I loved it.
Yeah.
Some other things I loved about the depiction of memory was how they have to like go down again the windy hallways to try to sort of like crawl their way out. And then how Joy, like when she was trying at the beginning to get Sadness to like go away so she could save the day, she was like, here, Sadness, read this. It's like this like huge like binder about memory storage or something, and it just conveys like how complicated it is. And it is. Yeah. It's like super complicated. And it's like Joy would not read it, right? And then later on, it turns out it was really helpful that Sadness did read it and knew kind of like what to do or where to go. I really liked that too.
Yeah. No, I think it was wonderful. It's something that I thought of that wasn't really like in the movie, but made me, just kind of reflect on, is that I got the sense that, or it made me think about like trauma and how, to a degree, like all children and babies like start out like more on the same page, and only really different by like genetics, right? So it's like you have your own genetic makeup, et cetera. And then it's like we're put into different environments.
Unless the pregnancy was tough or the delivery's tough, stuff like that could already start the trauma.
That's true.
Cortisol firing and things like that.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. I think I know where you're going here.
So then they... like, again, it's like you have the opportunity, literally maybe at birth, a little bit different, totally good point. And then it's like all these things can happen to you,
at different stages and ages.
So like whether it's really positive experiences, really scary experiences, but it's like all of those things we think of like, right, nature versus nurture, like impact us. So I think that if Riley in the movie hadn't been able to speak with parents, or if parents hadn't been as supportive or nurturing, or like able to provide like that level of connection, like it's really a beautiful moment when they're all hugging at the end, and like Riley is then able to like share really difficult things, but then she feels better.
I know,
but like if that hadn't happened,
I know, when she was able to say like, I know you want me to be happy, but I'm so sad.
And like that's huge for a young child to be able to verbalize, and then to have a really positive response. Right. So I think it's like this movie did a good job at showing like ideally, and what does happen a lot, but like when it doesn't happen, that's when, our kind of predispositions might kind of be triggered in specifically eating disorder treatment. I'm thinking of, like we say often, that like genetics loads the gun and your environment can pull the trigger. So it's like if she had a predisposition maybe for depression or anxiety, it's like something like this could really bring that to the surface versus just like a situational, right? Like she's sad, like this is a difficult change. So that's what I was kind of like carrying through the movie. And then it just made me think of even more so like the ACEs study, right? Like, so all like environmental stressors and traumas that we can go through that make us more likely to experience mental health disorders, 100%. Medical issues, so 100%. On and so forth.
And on that note, as a little teaser for a future episode, I think we should watch this movie called The Florida Project. Did you ever see that?
No.
and talk about the ACEs study because it's a very different movie from Inside Out, where they show a lot of trauma that a young child's exposed to. And anyway, stay tuned if you want something a little less lighthearted down the road. Another thing I love, and 100% Portia, I love that point. I also love that they didn't, like, the parents weren't perfect at this.
Yes.
You know, and that they really did show sort of that tension within Riley between feeling like she needs to kind of be quote unquote strong and happy for the family and for her dad. And her mom kind of says that directly at one point, and then it's sort of like, thank you so much for making this easier, and how that puts so much pressure on a kid. Again, like she wasn't intending to.
Right.
It was meant to be, I think, like an acknowledgement of how quote unquote well she'd been doing and appreciation. But it just shows like that tension between Riley's authentic feelings and the feelings she feels like her parents want her to have. And again, so beautiful that the parents didn't just do it perfectly right from the start, but that they were able to get there. And again, that they handled her rebellion with like stealing the money and getting on the bus in like a nurturing way. They didn't immediately chastise her or punish her or, you know, yell at her or put their own big feelings, which understandably would get triggered in a situation like that, ahead of hers. They were like so glad she was safe, wanted to know what was going on, and then hopefully did have some kind of consequence that felt, you know, appropriate, you know, like it shouldn't be without consequence, but at least in my opinion, but they were really able to meet her where she was at there, which was beautiful. What did you think about at the beginning when like joy and sadness were going back and forth over like their recollections of the same event in the past? Like you know, like when sadness was like feeling so sad, and so all of the globes or whatever we want to call them started like having a blue hue, and joy's like, think of something happy, think about, you know, this or that, or, you know, something, and sadness is like, oh, I do love the rain. And Joy's like, oh yeah, you know, jump in the puddles, you know, splash around, it's so much fun. And she's like, I really like just standing there when the water fills my boots and
runs down my back, and I get really cold.
I get really cold.
And then she was like, oh yeah, I remember that movie when the dog died. And Joy was like, don't think of that one. But that's sadness.
I know. And then at the end, that core memory, you know, when she starts to kind of lose the different islands, you know, Family Island, Friendship Island, Hockey Island, you know, when they sort of remember that core memory together, that it wasn't just like someone's, you know, scored the winning goal or didn't.
Right.
You know, it turns out that Riley was really sad, but then her team sort of came around her and helped her feel better. And that's like such a beautiful, simplistic, common type of childhood experience to kind of learn how to integrate your emotions and hold on to two conflicting feelings simultaneously.
Because then she was using anger to play hockey, which was like a really appropriate way to like get out some like aggression or like some of that energy. And so it's like anger was allowed, right? To step up, if it wasn't just joy all the time.
Right. And I loved that they showed a girl playing hockey, like a really aggressive sport. You know, I just loved that. I loved it. Yeah. Did you, you probably didn't, but also on Disney Plus, like, you know, like when you watch a movie, then they'll recommend like other things.
Sure.
So of course, you know, I have watched all of them because I have kids. And they have like a little short where it's like Riley going on a date. And that's like really adorable.
That's cute.
Because I loved like at the end, or like toward the end when they're trying to get back and they use her like crush. I would die for Riley. Like they multiply him and like use him as a ladder. And then near the end when she like bumps into a boy and you see in the boy's mind.
I wrote that down. I thought it was hilarious and like so sweet. It's like all the alarms are going off.
Girls, gosh.
Yeah, in his brain. And it's like they don't know what to do. He's like frozen.
And then Riley's like, okay.
Bye.
And then at the very end, I think the last line just cracks me up when they're like, like Joy's like, everything's great now. What could go wrong? We're making friends. We're 12. Like, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
And you're just thinking, like, puberty's coming.
And they have the puberty button on the screen, and they're like, what's that? And like, it hasn't gone off yet. It's like, just wait.
Just wait. I thought that was so perfect. I would love to see a sequel about puberty. Like, oh my God, I would love to see that.
That would be good. But you made a good point about like the parenting not being perfect, because I think what happened to Riley initially before there was kind of that repair is like a really common experience, I think, in childhood. Many people, and it's not, you know, like a trauma or this big event,
or
but there's
like
all
malicious,
these little,
you know,
these little misinterpretations where it's like, if you had gone back and asked a parent, is this what you meant? They would be like, no, oh my gosh, of course not.
Right.
Like, I'm so sorry that, you know, that's what you thought. But like, you know, us wanting you to be strong was just like our hope. Like, we didn't want to put that on you, I imagine them saying. But like, that happens a lot.
Right.
People have a hard time talking about their parents.
Yeah,
you know,
especially when they do like love them.
Yeah.
Yes, I hear that a lot. Like, I felt bad about what I said last time. And it's usually when they're expressing anger, fear, shame, sadness, you know, things like that. I think that's what I was wondering about the 5 main emotions. Why did they pick disgust over something like shame? You know, like that was the disgust emotion was the one where I was like, I don't know if that would have been the 5th one I would have picked. What about you?
I feel like they tried to frame it as it was also keeping Riley safe.
Yeah.
Like they said from being poisoned. Like,
that's
ha,
true.
Ha, ha, broccoli. But I feel like, to me, it could have been fear's job.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like disgust and fear were kind of
But I think, I don't know if I think they should have included shame. That would have been nice. But I feel like shame is so complex.
Yeah.
For kids. I don't think it is for adults. And you still can feel shame as a kid. But I feel like
maybe you don't have the words at that age yet. You know, and as I was saying that, I was thinking like, well, maybe they were thinking about like, what are like primitive emotions, you know, and like,
because disgust is primitive, right? Like, if you showed anything, something like rotten, even animals know,
so
like,
maybe
when
that's
not to eat something.
Maybe these are like the main primitive feelings. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, I'll give him a pass for that. Some other things I loved, like the night shift when like they would change over to the night and she's dreaming. And I loved that her dreams as like a 12-year-old girl are like about unicorn princesses and like her teacher and being at school and like all these things, and like just how they depicted dreaming and how sometimes it incorporates, you know, what you went through that day and all the feelings that come up, and then like dancing unicorns. I just thought it was like so great.
And when she was a little girl, in like early childhood, I liked how they showed when she was jumping over furniture, actually lava.
Yes.
And it was like your imagination is so like
big,
powerful and real when you're a child. So like, it's not that you are seeing lava on the floor, but your imagination is so powerful that like you really can like feel it. You know? Yeah.
And that even goes to into with Bing Bong, you know, like reuniting, like how excited Joy was to see Bing. Like, we used to have so much fun, and just like showing all the ways that Riley would like play with her imaginary friend again as an only child. You know, I thought that was an interesting choice as well.
Yeah.
And then how like, you know, while Bing Bong had to like have the realization that he had to stay behind for Riley to grow, it was almost like her core emotions had to be able to tap into her inner child in order to grow. It was just so beautiful. Yeah. I loved it.
Yeah. I thought it was just like an excellent. I think you should watch this in grad school.
Yes,
or,
right?
you know, like, any like their psychiatry class.
And like, you know, like in middle school when they teach you about sex and it's always awkward and weird. Like you could also watch this as part of that whole maybe
I agree.
curriculum of like development. You know, like maybe we introduce this in like 4th grade.
Yeah.
You know, like it's real easy for kids to understand. I think kids really resonate with it, but again, because you're seeing these really complex emotions depicted in a movie, like with imagery and jokes and all this stuff. And like kids at Riley's age mostly wouldn't really have the words to say to her parents, like, actually, I feel this way. And when you say I'm strong, it makes me feel confused or this way. Like, again, they don't have the words yet.
Right.
So it was just I just loved it. Like they were on the train And the whole thing, like, well, what are these? This is facts. This is fiction. Oh, who cares? We just mix it up. Like, we don't have to keep it organized. Just like funny little jokes like that. We're so smart and witty. I loved it.
Yeah, I laughed at the like fact versus opinion. It's
yeah, that's what it was.
In a box, and like they all look the same.
Just mix them up.
What else? I thought it was interesting thinking of like the memory dump, right? And like where we forget things. But I think it's also interesting, or just something to like reflect on, is that it's still to a degree in there
somewhere,
right? So you can be triggered and all of a sudden have this memory for, or have a little bit of almost, which I think is such an interesting concept, like dejavu, right? Like you have this little dejavu, like, feeling based on like a smell. You're like, oh, like there's something like I remember about this, and you can't quite like touch on it. I think that's, they also, I mean, again, not in the words that I'm using, but like referenced that.
They did. I loved that, the deja vu reference. And I thought they picked just such poignant, like cognitive functions to portray, right? Like obviously they don't depict everything, but the ones that they did, and when they used the ones like humor, fact versus opinion, when they used deja vu, fact versus opinion to really be humorous, but on point. I just loved it. It was so funny.
I had heard one time that like deja vu, or someone who experiences a lot of deja vu is like an older soul. And like you've been here before many times, and someone who like doesn't experience it a lot, like is new.
Ooh, I kind of like
just
that.
Interesting way to think about it. I've heard, what else? Like, if you have a lot of deja vu, you're like way more open, you're more like empathic, you're more like just like have a lot of self-awareness. You might not be like a great like
human,
I don't know, but like you just feel like you're open to things, and then if you don't, it's like you're closed. I think it's just interesting how people like perceive it, besides, you know, I guess like the definition of it.
That makes me wonder if there's any like neuroscience that's looked into that. I bet there is. Now I kind of want to go look it up. If we find any, maybe we'll again try to put it in the show notes. I don't know what that means, but we'll try.
People link their merch to it, so I feel like it's got to just be a link.
Oh, okay. Maybe we can make some merch for deja vu. Yeah. Be like, you've bought this before, buy it again.
That's funny.
Do you have a lot of deja vu? I feel like I don't really.
I feel like I used to, and I don't know what that means, but I feel like I used to have deja vu very frequently, and like would say that to my mom or like my partner or like a friend, and just be like, oh, I feel deja vu right now. I haven't lately, and I don't know, like just even thinking of brain development, right? Like my brain is less elastic as it was years ago. I don't know if that decreases it. Again, thinking about more of like a neuro approach to it.
That's interesting.
Or I'm, you know, something with my soul is off.
Yeah, maybe you're closing that door. Is there anything else about this movie you want to talk about, or
not? Then that just everyone should see it.
I know.
I'm really curious to
it's adorable.
Get people's perspective on it. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it would be interesting for like patients to watch it, for, you know, friends, family, just in like what they take. I'd be curious.
I feel like this is the kind of movie that like on an inpatient psychiatric unit of all ages, honestly, but especially probably kids and teens, this would be a great one to have on, like in the milieu. Yeah. That's like a fancy word for just saying like the common area. But don't you think that would be like a great one to have on? Yeah. It's just so great. And I really want to like start a GoFundMe or something for a sequel about puberty. Yeah.
I know. I think that we got like a 3-second approach with the guy, with the boy and his brain. I was just like, I want more of this.
But you know what we really need, Portia? And like, honestly, maybe this is our call to task with this podcast, is a sequel about living through COVID as an adolescent. Like, don't we need that? Like, don't all the teens need it? Like, there's such a huge mental health crisis right now. Like, we need it, Disney. We really, really need it.
I feel like every intake I have with like a younger person, I'd say like 22 and under. And I know obviously it affects older people, but I think it's really interesting to see how COVID impacted like youth and college students, because it was so, I think like when you're an adult, like things tend to be a little bit more stable, right? Or the same.
And also your brain is, your frontal lobes, the part of our brain that makes us human and helps us with our cognition, decision-making stuff, doesn't finish developing till like 25, 30.
Yeah. So like middle school, right? Like middle school is so important. High school is so important. Like, college can be so important, right? For like specific developmental milestones. So to miss about 2 years, really, I think like the end of one. So I, was kind of reflecting on it with someone recently who's like freshman year of college.
Right. Like a pivotal year.
They went home.
And did not come back
in March and never came back. And then the following year, their school like did online only. So it's like they missed 2 full years of what to me, and again, like are developmentally such important times.
I know.
We have been impacted in many other ways by COVID, and we could go on and on about that. But I think it's very unique to younger people with like in the context of their development.
And also unique that it happened to all of them.
Right.
And it was happening because of a trauma.
Right.
Right. Like a very scary, life-threatening time that like as a middle schooler, high schooler, how is your brain making sense of why you have to stay home and why mom and dad are scared and why you're doing school online? And, I will say I found like some people, especially like kids who were being bullied or have a lot of social anxiety or things like that, excuse me, like really thrived in that break from daily peer interactions. But I think on the whole, like, gosh, just so disruptive and social media. It's just like, I feel like we're just going to be seeing the effects for the rest of our lives and careers, honestly.
I think so.
Disney, like we really, really need a sequel about coming through COVID. Like
COVID did impact every single student in the United States. Like whether it was just fear, whether it was online learning, whatever it was, like everyone was impacted.
And everyone's like experience and the impact it had will be different.
Right.
But it was there.
Right.
Like, did you ever learn about the, what was it called? The GAF score, where they would try to rank like stressful life events. We used to use it like in the ER when you'd be evaluating someone and trying to think about like, what are their psychosocial stressors? There's some researcher out there who wants like quantify it.
Yeah.
So they would like, did some kind of research study and then assigned like points to different stressors, and like death, divorce, and moving were like the top 3. So these were positive stressors like having a baby, and then also negative stressors. And just did, we back in the day, I guess people used to like actually tally it up and put a GAF score in your note, and that would help gauge like if you go to inpatient or outpatient or things like that. We kind of stopped doing that, but just it was really helpful to sort of keep that in mind as like stressors.
I think that's
like
great.
COVID is like top of the list now, right? For literally everyone. Even if like you're generally doing okay, it's still there.
And
we're still living
like
with it.
Yes. Coming up, I think, really interestingly in ways that I, with all of my patients, whether it's like just reflecting on why you kind of got catapulted into this mental disorder around that time. Interesting. What's that about? Or having parents kind of lose it during COVID and then make decisions that then impacted, my patient or something like that. So I think like a lot of stuff keeps coming back to that time. I think emotions or anything that you were going through separate from COVID during COVID maybe got like even like shuttered, and like now it's like things are coming out, and it's just it comes up everywhere.
It's like and it's interesting. I don't know if you're finding this, but now that we're closer to like 3 years from when, it's also hard to believe like where we were 3 years ago. Like I think about that sometimes. But just now when people are noticing having like reactions this time of year, or, people are starting to travel more and maybe have like anxiety about that when they didn't. And I'm finding a lot of people like don't recognize that like you live through COVID. Like, let's not forget that part, so usually I remind them and I say, even if this isn't at the front of your mind, if you're not like worried about, do I wear a mask or not? Like it's still there. And of course it's going to affect you. And like, you might just notice feeling different, about traveling or something than you did before. So I really want to petition Disney to make a sequel. Like, I feel like the kids need it. Like, the kids need it.
Kids need something, I think, to make sense of Like, and just like kind of not, that it's Disney's job, but like just something to help them like process and like kind of.
But Disney does such a good job with this stuff.
And not that it's not this ongoing issue, but like just some way to like formalize or, identify, make it concrete.
Yes, just like this movie did.
Yeah.
With like these typical developmental things. Yep. Like, what a hard concept to depict.
Friendship changes.
Yeah, integrating complex feelings and being able to sit with it. Like, it isn't Disney's job, but Disney's like really good at this stuff, and they have the budget.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll write them a letter today. We'll see.
Well, thank you for listening. We hope that you enjoyed hearing about Inside Out. It's really fun. I think, watch it again if you've seen it. Tell someone to watch it. I just think it's great.
And please sign our change.org petition in the show notes.
Yep. So make sure you're following us on Instagram at Analyze Scripts. Make sure you send us an email if you'd like to chat or give us some ideas at analyzescriptpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure that you are subscribing to us on Apple Music and Spotify and wherever else you find your podcasts. And I think that's
all of that.
That's it. Stay tuned. We'll see you next Monday.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast and its contents are a copyright of Analyze Scripts, all rights reserved. Any redistribution or reproduction of part or all of the contents in any form is prohibited. Unless you want to share it with your friends and rate, review, and subscribe. That's fine. All stories and characters discussed are fictional in nature. No identification with actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, or products is intended or should be inferred. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The podcast and its contents do not constitute professional, mental health, or medical advice. Listeners might consider consulting a mental health provider if they need assistance with any mental health problems or concerns. As always, please call 911 or go directly to your nearest emergency room for any psychiatric emergencies. Thanks for listening and see you next time.